All right, welcome back. Hopefully you had some discussions. Obviously you weren't busy voting because only 4 people have voted right now. So take this time to place your vote in. How many may have an air shipment? If so, what should the quantity be? 0, which means don't order now. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. And we did it in increments of 5 because you have to ship in full cases. So that's a common problem in reality. And a lot of the problems we give you in SC1x, we don't give that to you just so you understand how the mechanics work, but in real life, you almost always have a case size to some point. So I'm just going to keep blathering on until I get at least 20% of you voting. So there's a little over 50 of you here, so I expect at least 10.
We're at 5.
We're at 5 now, so it's like a telethon. I'm going to keep talking. But so there's a bunch of different ways. The reason why I like this problem, let me just give you some background, is this was just one piece of it. The real problem is these are fashion items. And so they're only introduced for about 6 months. And so then they go away. So embedded in this problem of should I airship or not is the whole idea of I don't want to have a lot of extra inventory at the end. In fact, the bigger question is what should my inventory policy be for these items if I have to order them, say, X months ahead of time, right before the selling season starts, and I only have 1 or 2 chances to place an order during that short selling period. So this naturally suggests a newsboy or a news vendor problem, right? Because you have to make a decision ahead of time, and then you only have a couple chances to remedy or to do intermediate orders. That's kind of a complicated problem because we never really talked about a newsboy with 2 periods. I think I hinted at it when I talked about Tom Brady jerseys, but generally we focus on the single period. And so you can imagine if I have a chance where my selling period is this, if I have a chance in the middle to do another order, then what do you think that initial order of Q would be? Would it be greater or smaller? Hopefully, thinking it through, it'll be a little smaller than if you didn't have that period, that secondary ordering period, because now I can recover. So I don't need to order enough, so much that I cover all the way. I can order low and see how the sales go, because then I could adjust that second order to uncover if demand increased or make it really low in case demand didn't materialize. So in a lot of these fashion item situations, you'll have the advanced order, and then 1 or 2 weeks in, you'll have a chance for a secondary order, maybe at a little higher rate, but still it's a chance to recover because you don't know what your demand is going to look like. That was more of the problem, but I wanted to focus in on one little aspect of it, and that's this one. And you could think of a couple different implications of this, but 2 approaches kind of came to mind. And I'm still not at 10. You guys need to vote. You need to vote. Let me see what you're thinking. So if you haven't voted yet, take this time to place a vote, whether you think it should be 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, or 25. I promise I won't make fun of you if you give a wrong answer, because there really is no right or wrong answer. It's just it's based on the assumptions that you're making. So, okay, I think we're there. Okay, so it looks like we're evenly split. You know, actually, the most predominant, do they see the poll? Do they see the results? Okay. So this is very short, but let me just give you a preview as Arthur switches to it. The most dominant one is none. So the idea, and so let me just talk about the poll, and then I'll talk about the approach that I think everyone took. Most people, well, you can see it now? Yeah. It's getting there? Okay. Yeah. Most of the majority said 0, because don't do anything now, and some hinted that maybe we should do something in a few days. Other answers ranged 10 was the next most common, and then 20 and 25, 1 each. So 2 approaches to this, in my opinion, that came to top of mind as soon as May started talking about this, and I winnowed it down. First is you meet your CSL, your cycle service level. The second is look at profitability. For cycle service level, you go to 95%. And so the basic approach would be, okay, what is 95%? How much inventory do you need for 95%? And what some people make mistakes with, and what I did the first time, and Inma and Sergio corrected me, is I look for over the entire length of the ocean, L naught, 40 days, when in fact, we're 5 days in. So you have 35 days left of your time. So do I have enough inventory for 35 days? So you look at the demand over the 35 days, and I think that came out to be, what did it come out to be?
86.
86 with a standard deviation of 16. And now some people say, well, since it's already shipped, I don't need to do standard deviation anymore. And that's not really true, because if you look at ocean shipping, yes, there's some variability on the upfront, but there's also port-to-port variability, and then at the other end. So I wouldn't take all the variability out just because it left. I would keep that in. So you have this variability, and so then it's pretty mechanical to figure, okay, how much do you need to have 95%? And the current for 102 bags, I found out that would give you a probability of stock out of 83%. Is that right? Do I have that?
Stock out 17%.
Oh, 17%, so it gives you, that's backwards, right?
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so your probability of stocking out of 17%, so just 102 bags, if you assume 35 days and all that, you really don't have enough. You're only providing 83% probability of cycle service level. In other words, 17% of the time, you probably stock out. So in that respect, if I wanted to make sure I hit CSL, I could ship, I think it's 10 point something, like 11, rounding up to 15, ship 15 bags. That's if you wanted to make sure at that point in time, you had enough inventory to cover that full 35 days. So then you can go in and say, okay, how many bags does it take? And you can figure that out. And they end up being, like I said, 11 round to 15. But you might ask two questions. One is that profitable? And two, why do I have to do it now? And so let me talk about the delay one first, because I think that's something that a lot of people suggested, which is really getting to like the policy. And so for that, the question is, should I ship now or should I wait? So if I ship now, I'm going to ship a certain quantity and it's going to show up in 10 days. So there'll still be 25 days left before ocean comes. Do we think they have enough to cover that next 10 days? Looks like it, because they're very, very strong. You can figure it out. What's the probability that they would stock out within 10 days? I'm guessing it's going to be really, really small, probably less than 10%. So then you could, and the next question is, well, when should I place an order? Should I check tomorrow to see what the inventory is, or 5 days from now, 20 days from now? You know you're not going to ship, let's see, 15 days from now, because you have 10 days left, so 35 months. At 25 days, so 25 days from now, you're not going to do it, because then it would come the same time ocean would. So you can start backing off. When's the last time you could have that it would affect? And you can do it that way. And so some people suggested check every 5 days or every next 10 days. That's fine. You could actually think about a policy that checks inventory on hand, because that comes pretty quickly. You could get that at the end of the day and compare that to the 95%, the inventory level required for 95% cycle service level with that amount of remaining time. And as you can guess, as that time period gets smaller, both things will go down. And so the question is, when inventory on hand dips below that, then you can trigger an order. That's one thought. But you can hold off for a while. So that's creating a slightly different policy for that.
Chris, one of our students, Maimun, asked if it would be okay to round down to 10. Or
sure. But so then what do you, so you say, is it okay? Sure. So what does it mean? So you're actually having a slightly different cycle service level. And so realistically, it's no big deal, right? You'd probably have a 94% cycle service level. So the question is, generally you round up, because it's better to be a little overstocked, but you have to look at the whole situation. Like I explained, for these bags, they're fashion items, so you don't want to have any extra. Maybe I would go down, unless you saw what the profit margin is on these things though, right? So I'd rather sell one and have one extra than not have one. So you have that trade-off. So I would have to tell you it depends. In this case, I would probably actually not order anything right now. I would probably go with 0, because delaying makes more sense. I hadn't thought that originally, but I think that makes sense. But let me give you another perspective, and that is if you look at profitability. Before I leave that, anything else you want to talk about the first approach? Because you and Sergio had slightly different.
No, I think we had the same approach. We just, our proposal was to order 15 bags, 3 cases, to maintain the cycle service level at 95%, if that's important for the company.
Okay. Well, Mai actually chimed in. She voted, as opposed to some of you other people who haven't voted yet. And she said 10 to reach the 95%. And so there might be a reason actually that I didn't get into and I didn't find out about, that your decision is now or never. Maybe you don't have a decision 5, 10 days. I don't know. But if I had no chance to delay and I wanted to stay with 95%, I would ship 15 bags, because the way the profit is looking here, it's pretty profitable. So I wouldn't want to be short. Okay, but let's talk about the second approach, and that's profitability. So hopefully you guys look at the profit a little bit to find out what it is. And actually, if you want to maximize profit, you can look at the expected profit if you do nothing, right? Just don't ship anything by air freight. And that came out to be around $3,700, $3,725 or something like that. And all I did was the probability of the price times expected demand minus expected units shorts minus the cost of the goods. So let me put this up. Arthur, let me know when they see that. Yeah. So this should look familiar to you. It's just a profitability statement. It's for news vendor, but it applies for a single period. The first term is looking at the expected demand multiplied by the the price minus the salvage value. And then you've got the cost of the goods sold, and that's C minus G, the cost minus that salvage value times Q, the amount you ordered. And the last term is the expected units short. And as you'd expect, you have the price you get minus the salvage value plus this big B, which is like an extra penalty if you're short. It's in the key concept documents. Hopefully you've tattooed this formula on your body somewhere. But the idea is that you can look at it from profitability. And so, initially I'm assuming no G and no big B. So no salvage value and no extra penalty for stock out. And in that case, the profitability, if you ship 15 bags, reduces the profitability by over $1,300. And the real lesson here is, remember, if you set a cycle service level of 95%, chances are that's not the most profitable level. In fact, usually when you set a cycle service level, the behavior is that you're assuming the stock out cost is massive, when in fact, even for a high margin value, it doesn't make sense. In fact, I didn't figure out, did you guys figure out what the max profit would be? I think you'd have to ship bags back to have the maximum profit number. So remember, because when you do the maximum profit, you're looking at the cost of shortage and excess, and you're balancing that. However, you can go a step further and introduce a salvage value and then an extra penalty for stock out, because we can look at the loss in margin, right? If I don't sell one, then I don't get that margin, but also I might incur a penalty that these people might say, you know what, these bags, they're never in stock. I'm never going to shop here again. I'm going to go buy something else. And so you have this other penalty that is incredibly difficult to find, this big B. But what you can do is back into it. So let me talk about both of these letters, the G and the B. The G is the salvage value. So for Newsboy, we've kind of made the assumption at the end of the selling period, if I have extra inventory there, it goes away. I have to scrap it, burn it, and I don't get any revenue. And that's not the case. For a Newsboy problem, it is, right? After that period, you can't do anything. But I can assume a salvage value. So what if I assume a G? And I can make an assumption here that it's, I take holding costs, I take 2 months off or 3 months off, or think about the discount that I'd be able to sell it for. So let's say the salvage value is 10% less. You can figure it out that way and figure that in and figure out what your optimal value should be. The challenge is, if my salvage value is not that much different from my purchase price, then it's going to say order as much as possible. Just ship it there because the profit is so high. So it gets a little tricky. So you're going to have to really factor in the total discount such that the product is being eliminated. And that gets a little tricky. But let me talk about the B. So if you have this big penalty for stocking out, you can actually figure what that should be to make so the profitability of the two solutions are equal. So in other words, if I ship 15 bags, I can backwards calculate what would the stock out cost have to be, that additional B, such that it makes sense. Because then I can go back and say, you know what, this is what that B value is. So do we think the stock out cost is this? And when I did my initial calculations, which I don't think are quite right, did you fix that number too? Wow. It comes out to be about $1,100 a bag. So if you think the bags go for, how much did I say? What are the price of the bags?
$140.
Yeah, so this is almost 8x. So if you think the loss of a stock out results in a future revenue stream loss of about $1,100, then you should ship the bags. So it's another way to look at it, at the problem. So there's two different solutions there. And then the part 2 or 3, formalizing the policy. It's actually a really interesting question, because what no one has said that I can see yet, if I set a long-term strategy here, it will affect things. We didn't talk about safety stock. We don't know how much safety stock there is. But imagine that if I introduce this way of bringing things in 10 days instead of 40 days, what do you think the safety stock will do? It'll probably go down, right? So I would step back and say, because essentially then this cost of air is the cost of stocking out. And I can put that in and try to find what my optimal policy would be. So this is essentially like a B2 or a P2 pricing strategy, where you have, cycle service level and item fill rate, and then you have a P1, P2. And so this would be, I'm sorry, B1, B2. This would be a B2, cost per item. And then you could figure out what that is and come up with that optimal strategy. Because by introducing this expedited freight, you're reducing your safety stock, and that might give you bigger savings.
One of our learners, Thomas P. Layton, comments that he doesn't think that a salvage value applies to this bag. It is unknown if there is any diminished value of any older bag, meaning that a 3-month-old bag is as valuable as a new bag.
Oh, that is so not true. So the question is, this is a fashion item. And so I bet if you talk to anyone from the company, they would disagree with you, because there is a drop. I mean, physically, yes, it's the same bag, but just like clothes, just like how much would you pay for an iPhone 5 versus the iPhone 7 or whatever that's coming out? So, and it's not even just functionality, it's just the style. So there is a definite drop. There is perishability in these fashion items. The question is how much, and does it bleed? Is it a hard stop at 6 months when they stop selling, or can they start selling these through an outlet channel? Because if they keep it in there, if they keep that older item in the same stock, then it cannibalizes from their new products, which they make higher margins on. So I disagree a little bit that the value does drop. Any kind of fashion item. Anyone who's bought fashionable clothes, not me, my wife does though, you pay more when something's just launched, and then later on it loses in value. That's why they have to discount it.
In other breakout room, they were commenting what would happen if the man was back ordered. But,
Oh, back ordered. That's an interesting question. Then ocean, no air. If it's back ordered, you're not losing anything, right? So what the heck? Unless you're paying a penalty, which usually they're not. So if it's back ordered, think about iPhones. They're really clever. A lot of the companies do now is you do advance orders, and Amazon, so you do an advance order for something, essentially you're getting a demand signal. And so if we have back orders here, then I wouldn't even entertain air. I would have it just come in ocean, because I know they're waiting for me. And I would, yeah, I'd wait as long as possible, because then who cares if I stock out?
Yeah.
Any other?
Yeah, they in one of the breakout rooms, they broke it down into using the existing inventory on hand as a demand trigger, probabilistic average demand, versus delayed emergency, T-10, covering expected replenishment variability. I guess they are talking about the policy.
Yeah. So you get to the policy, I think. So if you're able to order later on, then you don't need to order now. I mean, that's the thing. So the policy would have to come up. Two things would happen if you institute this in a policy. One is your cycle stock, excuse me, your safety stock level would go down. And then it would be a little more complicated than just if you assume it's periodic every day as a period, you can check every day, even though you might not order every day. So you could have an RS. You could introduce an RSS, a little s and a big S. So I only look at it if it's below and above a certain number, but those numbers are not static anymore. Both of those numbers change as my time window to the ocean shipment arrives. right? So I don't even know what you would call this policy. I also don't know any inventory system currently in the market that would handle it. I'm trying to think, because usually you have to put a static quantity in. But what we're saying is the little s and the big S, the min quantity and the max quantity, shrinks as you get closer to this time window and then goes back up again once you ship. So it's kind of a dynamic inventory policy. There's a paper there somewhere for someone to write about this. And so it could be an interesting problem. So we have like 10 minutes left. And so if you have any last burning questions, send them through the chat. We'll respond to everything we get. Thanks. The voting has come in much more now. Yeah, we're up to almost 50%. Awesome. Thanks for participating. And again, this is just a rough idea of how you'd approach it. And I don't know what the right answer would be. I would, in this case, if you're allowed to, I'd delay a little bit, but still look for that trigger and use air very selectively, because this might allow me to lower my safety stock. Because with every fashion item, this isn't the only item they have. They might have tens or hundreds of items. You can treat them a little differently, and then some will sell more, some will sell less. So you can lower down your initial quantity here and use air to adjust. If something's a really big seller, you can use this more expensive but faster transport to minimize your total safety stock and your total costs. So we want to collect more of these kind of problems. So please email me if you have anything else, any problems that you think would be interesting for the group to solve or to talk about. Because the big thing I want you to take away is that it's not always obvious, and it's not always just the math. Because a lot of what happens here is you got to understand the other things going on with the company and in the situation.
So thanks.
Okay.
That was really interesting. And I hope you enjoyed it. Now I would like to ask Chris to just share with us some final thoughts to wrap up SC1x, and also give us some good reasons to enroll SC2x. Yeah.
So hopefully you're taking this in order. I think there's a wave. Took SC0x, probably with Amat. Is that right, Sergio? And then SC1x here, right? Because 0 is right before. And then you'll take SC2x with Sergio. And so in 1x, 0x is all methodology. Hopefully you're taking in order, and this wasn't the first one you've taken. If it is, I recommend you take 0 next instead of 2, because in SC2x we're going to use mixed integer linear programming a lot, and I'll talk about that in a second. But let me talk about SC1x. SC1x used all the methodologies that you learned in 0 in supply chain analytics to solve the basic fundamental trade-offs, and that's what we're doing here. Trade-off of shortage and excess, transportation and inventory, looking at cost and level of service. And where it gets really interesting is when you don't have all the numbers, or the numbers are squishy. And that's like 99% of all cases in business. Very rarely will an EOQ problem run up to you and announce itself. Hey, I'm an EOQ problem, or I'm a newsboy problem. There's different aspects of it, and there's always different approaches you can take. You just got to figure out the one that makes sense for your situation. So in SC1x, we taught you forecasting, how that fits into inventory planning, and how transportation fits into that. Because the biggest thing for supply chain is that product. That has the biggest cost to it, whether it's the sunk cost if you bought too much, the shortage costs. So both the forecasting and transportation feed into that. And hopefully you're getting a good understanding of how they interact with each other. Better forecasting leads to smaller safety stock. Faster transportation can also affect the inventory policies as well. For SC2x, we kind of focus in on the design of the flows, the physical flow, the financial flow, and the information flow between a buyer and a seller. And so we start with the physical flow, and the main tool that we focus on is something mixed integer linear programming. So if you don't know what a MILP is, you shouldn't take SC2x yet. You should go back and take SC0x, which starts in 1 week, the 13th of September, because that will talk about optimization. And we'll talk about linear programming, integer programming, and mixed integer linear programming. Because in SC2x, we use the heck out of it. We use it for network design. We use it for aggregate planning. We use it for production planning. We use it for procurement, because it is the most widely used tool in practice. So mixed integer linear programming. We'll talk about the physical design, facility location, how you should flow products. We'll talk about channel strategies. So what we were talking about here is a wholesaler where we're shipping things out, but there might be another way these bags are sold, which are through e-commerce, which has a very different demand pattern. So we'll talk about that as well. And then we'll introduce finance. We'll talk about supply chain finance and the critical things that you need to know to be able to talk the language of the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer. And we'll also discuss a little bit about procurement, how that ties in, and also on the other end, the customer side. We'll follow that information flow from supplier to final customer, and then some of the reverse flow. But the whole idea in 2X is to take the methodologies from 0, the trade-offs from 1, and kind of show how they all fit together in the design. I like to call it the cornerstone class, and I sent that note out when I introduced myself to the class this morning. It's the thing that ties together the first 2 courses with the second. The first 2 are very quantitative models, kind of done in a vacuum. And then the last 2 are all about practical implications, whether it's dynamics of other partners, border effects, disruptions, the size of the company, practical concerns. That's what we really move into. But you can't do that until you understand the models. So SC2X is the keystone. It kind of ties things together. And that's why, to me, it's my favorite class. I love teaching the first half of it because people finally see how network design works. And that's really a cool concept. So that's why you should take it. And also you should take it while Sergio's still teaching it, because he's the best. And he's sitting in the room. All right. So that's my 2 cents on it. Any last comments or questions, Inma?
Yes, we will be happy to have you in SC2X or SC0X, so please enroll. And before ending this live event, let me share with you a few practical issues. We will open our final exam of SC1X tomorrow at 15 UTC. So remember, it is a timed exam. You only have 4 hours to complete it, so plan your time well. It consists of 4 problems. You will have plenty of time to do that. 4 hours is more than enough. And please carefully read the instructions before beginning to complete the exam. This is really, really important. Second point I would like to share with you is an important notice for all of you verified learners. And it's a call for you to verify your ID in the platform, in edX, because if you don't do that, we won't be able to send you your certificates once you pass the course. So please look at it, and if you haven't done it, do it now.
Because remember, your ID verification, where you do your photo and then you show your ID photo, that's not tied to any course. That's done annually. So I don't know when the last time you did it, but every time you run a class, there's at least 3 or 4 learners who forgot when they did it and they don't get certificates. They have to go do this stuff, and we have to go through this big process. And so just check and see when your ID verification runs out, and just re-ID verify.
Yeah, this is very important. And finally, we are looking for community teaching assistants. Well, since you know we are opening new courses, SC0X, SC2X, and SC4X. And we are looking for motivated learners who want to help us in the forums, to help to create a great learning experience for all your fellow learners. So if you're interested, please fill out the form. We are sharing in the updates in the SC1X, and also in the newsletter I will send today, there will be a link to this form to apply. So that's all from my side. Chris, okay. Anything you would like to add?
No, I think I've talked enough. I think we're good. Thanks, guys. Good luck on the exam that opens tomorrow.
Yeah, good luck.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.